Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the close range meta. And this is the part where it seems like it's been a little bit up in the air. And we'll kind of talk about some of the things that make or define a good meta up close weapon and why some weapons people choose over the other. If you enjoyed the video, learned something new, please do me a favor, hit the like button. If you're brand new, want to find your way back, double check, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Let's go ahead and get into it. So one of the first things I wanted to show you is a concept of this last attachment here. And what you really want to do is with this one, a lot of people will ask, well, which do I use? Do I use the 55 round drum mag or do I use the 55 round fast mag? And this one really depends on the weapon. And I'm going to show you a specific example between the Mac 10 and the brand new OTS 9 and kind of show you what is happening. So here's an example of what these guns look like. So what I have right here is the Mac 10. As you can see, it's pretty clear. I'll go ahead and move this over just a little bit more so it's right in full view. And then what happens here is we'll look at this animation. So I fire the weapon and then I reload. And when you do a reload, you can see these crosshairs right here at the middle of the screen. You see like my arrows directly on it. If I go one over, you can see they disappear. That's when the reload animation is starting. And this is the reload add time with ammo in the bag. Because if you actually go all the way to 0, it ends up being slower than if you have at least one bullet in. And that's pretty standard for all Call of Duty, for pretty much almost every weapon. So as we go through, what we do is we look at that. And then what we do is we wait until this 52 turns back into a 53. And that's how we get the reload add time. If we look at it over here, this is the standard 55 round mag that we're going to, or 53 round mag that we normally see on the Mac 10. And it ends up being 1.50 seconds or 501. And then when we do the aim down sight time, we can do the same thing. We do the 1 frame when mount shows up on the screen. And then we go ahead and go a little bit further. And then we go all the way until the frame stops moving. You can see right there, right at 234. See the frame shifts? It's like between 217 and 234. If I actually recorded at more frames, we would get a little bit closer, but it's in between 217 and 234. And then what we could do is we could do the same thing for the OTS. And the OTS actually has a slow reload, well, relatively slow compared to with the fast mag. So we'll go ahead and take a look at this. So this ends up being 1.7 seconds, 1.75 right there. And that's when the reload comes through. You can see it goes from 39 to 40. And then when we do the same thing over here, we could go ahead and look at the Mac again, and it ends up being 1.485. So it's half a frame faster on the reload. That's it. By going with the fast mags on the Mac 10. Basically doesn't matter. You wouldn't even notice it. The reload time ends up being a little bit slower. It's for sure 134 or 234 this time. Instead of that partial. See, it even goes a little bit slower versus the other one was somewhere between 217 and 234. You can see it slows down. So for a slightly sliver of something you won't even notice on the reload, it will actually impact you in the gunfight because you're going to aim down sight slower by roughly 1.5 frames to 2 frames. So it kind of is on both sides, fairly even, no big deal there. But when we go to something like this gun, it ends up reloading in 1.1 seconds. So very fast, 1.118. So it actually shaves 600 milliseconds off that from that 1.7. So it's definitely worth it in this case. And this gun definitely needs it because it only has a 40 round mag. It's kind of like the MP5. Look at how fast that reloads. That wasn't modified. That's the actual reload speed. So that one might be one that's worth doing it. But then when we go over here, look at the aim down sight. It ends up being 267 milliseconds. So it's case by case. You can see where it shifts there and then it doesn't move again. It's case by case on each gun. That will definitely slow it down. The original was 267. This one's 267. So in this case, it is probably so small a difference, it's not really noticeable. Or you'd have to go a little bit further on the frame. So in this case, you would 100% use that last mag for the OTS. And then the Mac 10, it really is going to come down to preference. And every gun has these scenarios, but more often than not, it's not usually a big deal because the difference between them is so negligible you probably wouldn't be able to tell. There's a very few exceptions to that where it's like the ODS or OTS, where it actually makes a significant difference and is worth trying. So let's go ahead and jump into some of the other important stats when it comes to the close range meta. I still plan to update this spreadsheet on the attachment side because we haven't gone through and re-ranked them. Like I said, I'm going to do that. I just haven't had the time with me moving and doing spreadsheet stuff and testing. It's just not all there, but we'll get there. So I went through and there was a mistake on this one just because I kind of transposed some of the information from the patch notes over, and there was one that impacted a little bit more than others, which was the Milano. It actually had less changes than the patch notes said, and as a result of that, it ended up still staying intact and is mostly still good. But besides that, even though the numbers were slightly different in some of the cases after True Game Data put out his video, where his community was able to test, it didn't really change the TTKs on much. So everything I had is still pretty accurate. Even if a number was off here or there, the TTKs were still the same. So I ended up adding a lot more categories here to simplify this and also, I guess, complicate it. But a lot of people were requesting certain things. And what I've done is I've added the average damage. So that means if you shoot them in the toe, if you shoot them in the stomach, the chest, and then the head, and then you average those values. On top of that, we get the rate of fire mixed in. Based off that damage, you multiply those together and it gives you a, quantified DPS, which kind of gives you an idea of how much something does damage over time. And then we also have damage per mag, which becomes incredibly important in certain things, and that will definitely halt something from becoming meta. One thing you aren't seeing on this list is shotguns. I don't normally have shotguns on these lists because they usually melt within their certain damage range. We kind of already have an idea which ones are the best. So I've gone and sorted all of these by the one-shot close range TTK, which you can see right here. We have the Akimbo M19s straight across 400. That is the fastest, but that relies heavily on you being very close and then just landing the shots, which in hip fire can be a little bit tricky. And as the further you get away, that becomes less practical. AS-Val, big issue over here with the damage per mag. MWMP5 has risen to the top of everyone's board because of these values are so competitive and weren't touched compared to all these other weapons that are highlighted in blue. We have the nail gun. Pretty nasty, but has a damage per mag issue. Psychov, very good option, and it could be a little bit tricky for some to use at range. The mobility nerfs on this thing are really kind of what hold the Psychov back, but a great ghost, restock, high alert weapon where you're not going to be running overkill. Maybe grab that one late game, ghost with the growl fully loaded, like I've talked about in some of my previous top 10 loadout videos. Then we have a Cold War MP5 that's still pretty competitive. It does have more recoil, I think, personally, than the MP5, but maybe that's just preference. Even though it does go vertical, it feels like it's way stronger vertical. And then we have the OTS-9, which we just talked about. We do have a low damage per mag, but not so low compared to the Cold War MP5 and the Modern Warfare MP5. But the big thing to keep in mind is these three guns, as soon as you get around 10 meters or more, the number of shots, the damage, drop off pretty hard. So this actual number is not that great, and you need a lot of shots to actually down a player. So these become very less, way less practical once you get outside of the 10 meters. Then we have the Fennec, has an amazing TTK. Pretty easy to use, terrible bullet velocity, terrible movement, but it has also terrible damage per mag. If this had a 60 round mag, you'd probably see it kind of come out to play, because then that would bring it up to like 1500 damage per mag. So that's probably the buff that I would recommend. Then we got the AK-74U. Pretty solid here with the headshot in the mix. You can see the Milano is good regardless. I've actually removed the open bolt delay on the Milano and the MAC-10, and you can see that these ones have really good TTKs without headshots. With headshots, it doesn't really matter. But without headshots, the Milano and the MAC-10, I think that's what's going to kind of lean towards that. Milano is way easier to use. MAC-10 is very forgiving because of its stupid high fire rate. But if you had to choose between these two personally, I think I prefer the Milano just because the damage per mag allows me to take on multiple players without being caught reloading. But the MAC-10 is going to be more consistent, reliable. You shoot, the bullets go there. If you miss, you make up for it really quick because that fire rate helps you to recover from that. Then I've included the Fin Adverse kind of more as a joke because a lot of people have been recommending it. It can melt up close, but it's more of a gimmicky troll gun. You're going to still get caught reloading. It's an LMG. It moves slow, all that stuff. But its TTK, pretty nasty. You can see the Bison actually competes with the Bullfrog now. They have very similar TTKs, whereas before the Bullfrog was hands down the better option. The changes they've made to both, one fires a little bit slower and does more damage, while the other one does the opposite, but that kind of evens them out. MB7, still kind of a fun option, but you're kind of better off using the Milano. It's kind of like the Milano, but it has way faster fire rate, so a little bit more forgiving. XM4, it's still pretty solid, but those extra shots to kill kind of makes it so that you're going to get outgunned by a lot of SMGs. And that's why it's kind of throwing a riff in the sniper support option, because there were some great rifle options that were good for point blank. And I think the Milano is still probably a great sniper support option because its TTK at range is still pretty solid. And you don't have to land a bazillion headshots. You get the same TTK. Whereas before you need to get headshots, they kind of modified the headshot value there. So it doesn't really help as much as it used to. Then we have the M4A1, the PPSH gets consistent TTK, but it doesn't benefit you to hit headshots, essentially, if you land one headshot. FFAR, P90. P90 looks like it has a pretty good TTK here. Not once guns start getting a headshot in the mix. That's why looking at least one headshot in the mix is pretty important, because more often than not at point blank range, if you kind of go up, shoot, chest, head, you're probably going to get that. One thing to keep in mind, it's always good to look at these from the spreadsheet and cross-reference them from the top, because, for example, with the P90 and the ISO, they suffer from having to hit almost every shot to the chest. 9 chest shots out of 10 for you to get that faster TTK. Same thing with the ISO. I believe the ISO is right here. You need 9 chest shots out of the 10, which makes it a lot less practical. What you'll more than likely see is this TTK right here, which is the 680 TTK, chest or stomach. So it's a little bit more practical, like it shows here, but it really just depends on how it's going to work out. You're really looking for trying to get the most consistency possible. And I think guns that require that many shots to the chest, if you end up hitting limb instead, it's going to lower and tank that TTK. So that's why we have those guns on here. And they do not really benefit from headshots, so they kind of stay a little bit lower. Then you have the M13, Farah, QBZ, Ram, Krig. So this is why the Ram kind of sucks the sniper support now. It's still good for that medium range outside of 20-ish meters, but it doesn't really compete up close. It just doesn't. And sadly, you'll get outgunned by a lot of weapons. So with that all being said, let's go ahead and check out a little bit of Warzone ranked, and then I'll get some loadouts for you for the top 5 or so SMGs that I think are the meta. So Warzone ranked actually lines up pretty solid here. If we go ahead and click these categories, we can actually sort it all by category. Too bad you can't just click AR and it'll only show ARs, but it is what it is. We'll go ahead and scroll down, and then what we can do is look at the SMGs. The number 1 SMG used right now is the MAC-10 because of the reasons that I mentioned. Because more people are going to use that in solos, duos, and trios. Quads, it can get a little tricky because you do have to be able to reset the gunfight. But it comes down to skill. This one is very easy to use. That's why the KD is a little bit higher. Then we have the Modern Warfare MP5, which we talked about why it's there. Hipfire builds, the damage, the TTK is all good. Then we have the other MP5, which is the Cold War version. And then we have the Milano, then the Bullfrog, and then the OTS. And then kind of after that, it's kind of drops off pretty hard. And I think the OTS, just because not a lot of people have unlocked it yet, or it might be even higher, especially in solos and duos. So you can kind of see those are the weapons that we'll be focusing on. What we'll do is focus on these top 5 here, and I'll give you a loadout for those top 5 as we go through those. So let's go ahead and get into those. So for the Bullfrog, there's a couple different builds. I normally just use the GRU. Most of these builds are almost all the same. You can go with the 65 round mag or go no mag, depending on how you want to use it. You can actually put on an optic if you want a little bit better mid-range. But most people are just going to kind of do the same tried and true build. Something along those lines. You go with the 65 round mag for higher game modes. If you don't go with that, maybe go with the Bruiser so you get better mobility, better hip fire. If you want to make it a hip fire build, you can go with 5 milliwatt, drop the skeletal, and then you know, maybe put on ammunition there so you could be a little bit more a hip fire thing without hurting your aim down sight too much. So you got 2 or 3 different builds there. Let's go ahead and talk about the Milano. So the Milano is the next one, and the Milano has all these different builds. This one's the one that like I've tried to veer away from, but this one still always ends up being the same one that I go to. If you want to use it a little bit more for sniper support, you can get rid of the Raider stock and put on the Microflex LED or the 3X optic. So if you're going to use it for range, obviously if you want sniper support or something like that, Microflex. But this is pretty much what I've been using, and I like this a lot. The other thing is maybe drop the Raider stock, put on a Bruiser, you get a little bit better hip fire and better movement speed. So you can kind of go that route. But there are a few different options there. Next up is the Modern Warfare or Cold War MP5. And the Cold War MP5, pretty much straightforward build. And everyone's kind of been forced to use a similar build just because that's kind of how it works. You go with the bigger mag. You go with the Tiger Team Spotlight. You go with the Raider stock. And then you end up putting no barrel, because the problem with this gun is if you put on a barrel, you mess up the iron sight. So pretty much you want to use a blueprint, and then you will be able to get rid of those iron sights. So just by looking at here, if I go here, armory, let's just pick whatever one. We go here, it doesn't have a barrel. Oh, well, let's get rid of this optic. And then what happens, you can see you get those clean iron sights on the top there where it's already chopped. So pretty straightforward there. And then we got the Modern Warfare MP5, which we switch over here. We can go Modern Warfare MP5, and I've been using this one a lot recently. A lot of fun. There's a couple different builds here. You either go set up with this with sleight of hand and the 5 milliwatt, or you go with the collapsible stock, or you get rid of sleight of hand and you put on both of those. So it ends up being a really nice hip fire. I know some people will use the monolithic suppressor because that's just kind of what they're used to. But overall, I prefer the monolithic integral suppressor. And that's kind of how you build out that. And that brings us to the number one or most popular one, which is that Mac 10. And there's a few different builds on that as well. Some people will go with the standard build, which is just this: Agency, Task Force, Tiger Team, Raider, and the 53 drum mag. Or sometimes what people will do is they're going to go a little bit more, get rid of the stock, and then they'll put on something like the Patrol or Striker. They'll get rid of the barrel, and then maybe they're going to use a no stock or something crazy like that. And they use all kinds of different options just to make it small, mobile, not messing up your hip fire, best sprint to fire. But to each their own. That's kind of more what people go with, is this type of build right here. Pretty straightforward and easy to use. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section below. Hopefully you guys did enjoy the video, learn something new. If you did, please do me a favor, hit the like button if you're brand new, want to find your way back. Double check, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.